So, what if I told you that Emu may have been inherently like a good guy, or at least kind of? Like, maybe Emu had good intentions, and they're actually trying to, like, protect the Earth. Well, we're going to be talking about that because today I got Dax, Sake, and Sai. So, let's start with Dax first because somebody brought your video to my attention about Emu maybe being the protector of the Earth in the first place. Just like real brief, it seems like, Emu maybe had possibly good intentions because the Earth, or the blue planet as it's known in One Piece, it's like super valuable. Because we already know from Manel's cover story that there was like the winged race that came down from the moon, maybe even before the Void Century, most likely before the Void Century, because I think they were already referred to as like ancient people or whatever. Their place ran out of resources and they came down. And from the Harley text and the murals, we saw that in the first world, people were like harvesting the forbidden flame or whatever, the earth energy from inside, and then they had the factories and everything, which parallels to what was happening with Kaido, parallel to what was happening on Caribou's cover story with that other place that he went to. I forget the name of it. So it seems like what Vegapunk was saying about he doesn't know which side was right, which side was wrong, maybe it plays into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big thing. I think the Vegapunk lines are a major hint that, like, we might think that the world government, or the 20 kings at the time back then, were the bad guys, right, going against the evil guys, but I think at this point we can say it's not that clear-cut, and not saying that Emu is for sure a good person either. Maybe it's a little bit of a mixed bag where Emu had good intentions but did it in a bad way, which is something we've seen a bunch of times. You think about Big Mom, who wanted to have a country where every race could live, but she obviously wasn't doing that in a good way, so that's a trope that Oda's done a bunch of times. And as far as was Emu the protector of the world, I think you were kind of hitting the nail on the head with the moon situation, because I think that's a huge parallel, because they ran out of resources, which technically I think is more so like the energy, which does tie to resources, because you can see in the moon mural panels that we got on the NL cover story, the first one shows like that little energy orb powered up, and then in the next one it's powered down and they're all leaving. And then even in Anel's cover story, you saw him go in and just blast the place with electricity, and then it all turned back on. So we can pretty much presume, okay, they ran out of power. And if you look at the moon mural, there's some weird kind of ties to the Elbaf mural. Whenever they're pulling energy up from the Forbidden Sun, the center of the earth or whatever on the mural, it looks like there's like this little track, this little thing they're walking on that looks very similar to the one on the moon mural where they're building the automata. And so I definitely believe there's an interplay there where the idea from the Void Century was probably the Earth God or the leader of the ancient kingdom, whoever the bad entity was siphoning out all the energy for their own, use from the planet and putting the Earth on basically the same trajectory that the moon was on, and where they would have ran out of resources and ruined the planet. And so Emu or the 20 Kings may have stepped in like, whoa, we do not want this to happen. The Earth is way too important. There's not a lot of planets in the universe that can do the same things as Earth, because even if you go and look at Skypiea, one thing they talked about was that Verth was really important because it grows crops, right? They can't grow that in Skypiea because the sky clouds only sustain crops. They don't germinate the crops. So if you don't have the Earth or Verth to start with, you can't grow anything. And if you can't grow anything, you don't have food. And if you don't have food, you all die pretty much. So I think that through line there is that much like how the Skypeans worship Verth, even making a statue out of it, which was kind of the reason I put that on the thumbnail for that video, maybe Emu was kind of in a similar boat where they recognized, oh yeah, Earth is really, really important. We cannot let this get ruined. And that's why Emu is, kind of ruling with an iron fist, you could say, not to be hurtful, but because I know if other people get in charge, they might ruin this place and then everybody's dead. So I'm actually doing a good thing. So that's kind of where I see Emu's place in the story currently.
It's funny, I've talked to Dax so many times, so I already kind of knew where he was going with that. But when it comes to like Emu being good, I do think that's what Oda's going to go for. Mainly because even in the most latest SBS, he talked about celestial dragons. And he's like, yeah, celestial dragons, I like to think we all have a little bit of that in us as well, right? We all have like that inherent greed. And when it comes to like, the people from the moon coming down, Emu wanting these resources, Emu wanting to protect the Earth, I think that makes sense. Like, we don't know what the ancient kingdom was like. And who's to say that, like, Emu defending his own country protecting these 20 kingdoms, like that's any less worth it than the ancient kingdom protecting themselves. We don't really know like what all that is about yet. And also, we don't even know what kind of promises Emu had, right? Because we heard about Davy Jones's promise. We heard about Joy Boy's promise. I guarantee that there's an Emu promise out there somewhere that he's trying to fulfill. And that could do with Emu's perfect world. We haven't seen it yet, right? Emu is still working on it. And, that sounds crazy considering the fact that Emu wants to sink the world, but maybe there's a deeper meaning to it. Like, we really do not know the reason why, and it's too early to judge. I mean, hell, even when Shaka told, I believe it was Frankie, Sanji, Robin, and Nami, as well as Usopp. I think that's like the whole cast right there. I think Brook was there too, maybe, but they were talking to them about like his hypothesis about the Void Century and what might have happened. We didn't see it as the audience, but when we came back, yeah, like, I think Usopp was like very shocked by it. He's like, what the hell? But Frankie, his reaction was, oh, how romantic. And it's like, wait a minute, like, what did he tell him about? Like, what was there for Frankie to say, oh, that's a romantic story? Which we know, like, in One Piece, romanticism is, like, very different from, like, oh, romance. Like, oh, it's two people falling in love. When it comes to that, it's more like an adventure. And, it goes back to Nolan and Calgara. One of my favorite things, I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but the chapter title was, like, To Be Hidden Underneath the Clouds, Two Halves of a Moon. And that is, like, a 2,000-year-old poem that nobody knows who wrote it. And it's about two people wanting to meet again one day. And then we go to the Harley text, and it's like, we get the whole line where it's like, oh, they'll never meet. Maybe one day they'll meet. And it's like, yeah, I think it's going to be something with that. There's going to be some sort of promise that Emu's trying to fulfill. I do not think they're going to be a true evil. And if they are true evil, that's only current day Emu. We've seen, even throughout like the real life, where over the course of time, people get more and more corrupted the longer they're in power. Like, for the world government, I do not think that they started bad. Maybe there's, like, one or two bad seeds, but I do think they started with good intentions, and then over the course of the years, which we heard from either Papagu or Hachi at Saboti, but they're like, yeah, each generation of Celestial Dragons, they get worse than the last one. So I think that's simply what it is.
I think you guys are spot on. Emu probably didn't start off inherently bad. Maybe they were, like an activist to some extent, because like the ancient kingdom was super advanced. It's essentially like what Egghead kind of was, and obviously the world isn't like that anymore for a specific reason. Like, technology is very rudimentary. It's kind of like that 1700s through 1800s type of, with very sparse type of stuff that only specifically the world government will use for, I don't know, controlling or whatever. But everything else is just, boats and, stuff like that. And it's because Emu wants it that way, I guess, because they saw that the ancient kingdom, that's not good. You're not supposed to be that advanced. You're supposed to keep it in a very specific type of way. And long story short, maybe Emu realized that they weren't strong enough to overcome the ancient kingdom, Davy Jones, Joy Boy, and all that, without going to an alternative power, which could have led to them being evil. And Dawn and Dusk actually discovered this, but the book that Emu pulls out when Bragi like grabs them in Elbaf, it's like a grimoire essentially. That might be like where all of this starts. Like, that might be the source of Emu's power, because also when Emu like summons that sigil with the pentagram, you see like those weird letters or the markings around it. And going back to Enel's cover story, which we love, when he looks at one of the murals there, we see pretty much the same wording or the same markings there. And I don't think it's a coincidence. It probably means that this abyss magic is like coming from the moon. And then that makes me think like maybe the devil dragon power is like from the moon. Like, I don't know, Emu summoned this devil from the moon or whatever, and then it like possessed them or something and made them evil. Because also, like, going back to the Harley mural, like, you see that devil dragon fighting the earth serpent, and the earth serpent fire thing is on the side of the people harvesting all this stuff from the earth. So it's like this is coming from the moon trying to overcome whatever they're doing, and they don't want that. So we go to the second world, which is the Void Century War, and it seems like Emu has that power of the dragon, and the dragon no longer exists. So in a roundabout way, I guess that's what happened. Emu was overcome by that grimoire devil magic and then just became evil, but had good intentions initially, and now they're just psycho, authoritative, totalitarian regime.
Yeah, we talked about this before the video started, or before we got on the call, that I had never even noticed that the same kind of language was on the moon mural, but I love that connection because I think something that Oda is kind of trickling towards here is that we're looking at Imu's powers as like some kind of demon magic, some kind of underworld, evil, just something new, right? Some kind of like loosely defined magic system. But I think, while I do think that's partially true, I think it's also going to be tied down to science in some way. And the fact that you just brought this up in regards to the moon mural, where the point of it is that they were really high tech, right? They were very advanced, kind of like the Ancient Kingdom probably is. I think part of this story, at least, is going to be that the Ancient Kingdom may have figured out this dark magic stuff because of how high tech they were. And then Imu might have been like, all right, well, instead of you having it, right, and using this, I'm going to figure it out because then I can take you over, sort of thing. And then we got to start figuring out, okay, well, what is kind of the basis of these powers then, if it's like a mix between science and dark magic, or the afterlife or something like that. I feel like there's a good tie here to the mural, because did you notice on the mural, like when they're bringing up the energy from inside the earth, on the other side there's people going down with halos on their head? It's always made me wonder, like, are those people going down and then like coming back to life because they're getting Forbidden Sun, right? Like, are the people who are coming up with it on the other side people who just got revived by going down there? And so then it makes me wonder, is there a connection between the Forbidden Sun, which is this really strong power source that's powering everything, and kind of the afterlife? Is the idea that, like, soul power is the basis of all this? I feel like that's maybe what we're trickling towards, because you look at Brook, right? He died and his soul went to the literal underworld and then came back, and he also saw these circles during his time skip, so I think there's an inherent connection between all that. So I think the idea is just science kind of uncovered, oh wow, you can do this crazy magic stuff if you are doing it the right way, and then Imu's like, I'm gonna take that, I don't want anyone else to know that exists, right? That's too dangerous, we're stopping there, I'm taking over. So that's sort of where I see this all going.
Oh yeah, I mean, even going back to like soul energy, right? It could be a very Nolan and Calgara-esque situation, which I always bring it back to that too, right? I think it's a very important arc. But when Nolan showed up, he saw that Calgara was about to sacrifice, was it his sister? Or his lover? His daughter. His daughter, yeah. He was going to sacrifice his daughter. And, Nolan had to stop that. And it's like, maybe it's the same thing here, where Imu saw the human sacrifices, and he's like, hey, maybe we don't use this energy source. Maybe we shouldn't do this. And then that's where we get magic stepping in, right?
Yeah, but ultimately, guys, let me know what you think in the comments. I think it makes sense, or it would just be good narrative-wise, that Imu isn't just, typical despicable villain just doing everything because they're evil. It's like they had good intentions at first, but then, along the way they just fell off. But let me know what you think. Check out Dak's channel, one of the best theorists in the world on One Piece. Check out Sai's channel, just one of the best in general. Don't subscribe to this channel, but let's try to get 2,000 likes, and see you in the next one, guys.